Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to our session for tonight, Hacking Research 101. My name is Alize Zaidi, and I'm thrilled to be here with all of you today. So before we begin, let me give you a brief overview of what the session is all about. Writing research papers in medical school can be challenging, but a rewarding endeavor as well. However, with practice and guidance from mentors, you can develop your skills and contribute valuable research to the field of medicine. This event today is designed to give medical students a basic outline of research work and is meant to be a guide for aspiring students to help navigate the process and produce high-quality research papers. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker for tonight, Dr. Khalid Khan. Thank you for being with us here today, who is a true visionary in the field of research, and he will be sharing his expertise and insights with us. Dr. Khalid Khan is a highly esteemed researcher participating in the Beatrice Galindo program, presently affiliated with the University of Granada, Spain. With an impressive H-index exceeding 100, he has contributed to the scientific community through the publication of over 500 peer-reviewed papers and the supervision of 25 advanced level theses. Prior to his current position, Dr. Khalid Khan held distinguished roles as a professor at the University of Birmingham and the Queen Mary University of London in the United Kingdom. He has also served as the Spinoza Professor at the University of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. Dr. Khalid Khan embarked on his academic journey by obtaining a medical degree from the Aga Khan University in 1988, being part of the inaugural health faculty cohort. Following this, he pursued further training at McMaster University, which paved the way for his career in academia, specializing in patient-oriented clinical research. Notably, he has held prominent editorial positions, serving as the former editor of the British Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology, Evidence-Based Medicine, British Medical Journal, and BMC Medical Education. Recognized for his influential contributions, Dr. Khalid Khan is the primary author of the esteemed publication titled Systematic Reviews to Support Evidence-Based Medicine, which has been honored with the British Medical Association Medical Book Award. His notable initiative, Core Outcomes in Women's and Newborn Health, CROWN, received a BMA Strutt and Harper grant, emphasizing his commitment to minimizing research inefficiencies. Presently, Dr. Khalid Khan stands among the top 2% of the most influential researchers on an international scale, further attesting to his remarkable impact in the field of academia. Dr. Khalid Khan will be addressing a comprehensive list of frequently asked questions, and he'll be covering a wide range of topics relevant to medical students today. Tonight, we aim to address your most pressing concerns and provide practical advice that can help shape your journey. Over to you, Dr. Khalid.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that introduction. And I would like to start by sharing my screen, and would be grateful if you could confirm that you can see it. And also confirm if you can see my slides.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
So you have my slides, and can you hear me okay as well?
Yes, I think we can all hear you pretty well.
So here is the title given for today's talk. And the way I have constructed this presentation is that I received a list of 20 questions from your organizers for today's event, as well as from students and colleagues outside your university. And I'll try to answer these 20 questions about clinical research in the next 60 minutes, in a little bit less than 60 minutes, and leave some time for more questions at the end of that. So the first question is, who is eligible to write a research paper? So for this, the key thing is to begin by thinking as to what research is all about. The starting point is a clinical problem that leads to the generation of a research question. And then following through the various steps listed here, one can lead to publication of findings. I think it's important to recognize that the research journey should not end here, because the ultimate objective of undertaking research is to improve the outcome of patients. So once the research is published, perhaps it will then be put through systematic review and further publications until eventually it will be put into a clinical practice guideline in the workplace. And then finally, patients will be able to benefit from it. So we'll return to this research journey outline in answering the various questions. The first question, who is eligible to write a research paper, pertains to this aspect of the research life cycle, publication. And the question concerns authorship. The rules concerning authorship are written by International Medical Journal Editors Committee and is guided by other organizations like Committee on Publication Ethics. Primarily, anybody who fulfills all of these 4 criteria: concept, design, conduct, interpretation, writing, final approval, and be accountable, can write a paper as an author. And if they don't meet these criteria, can be named in the acknowledgement section of a paper. Along with this, there is an organization called Credit, which has developed 14 authorship roles. And the idea is that these roles should be transparently presented for each individual, either named as an author or named in acknowledgement. So the answer to the question as to who is eligible to write a research paper, I suppose, is that anybody who meets the various criteria for authorship. And if they don't meet those criteria, then they can be named in the acknowledgement and make a contribution towards a research paper. The next question. What is the most suitable type of article that a student can write? Now, while you are reading through this question and looking through once again through the research cycle, I'm going to look at the chat where I presume somebody has left a comment. Thank you. It's Alice Zedi who said, please make your questions pertinent and precise. Well, thank you for highlighting that. I am happy to take questions as I go along, if that is what the audience prefer. So I'll take another break at the end of answering this second question and see if any questions arise as I present. So the important point here is that we are talking about a student researcher who does not have access to a lot of resources. Well, look, the greatest resource required in conducting and publishing research is time. It isn't necessarily money. So if you are prepared to work as a group together, and you are prepared to devote your weekends and holidays towards research, then you in fact have a lot of resources available. Your question is about not just about securing funding, it is about conducting the research that you may have planned. So let's think about what type of research exists. So if you think of the clinical process, a patient presents to us, they have some etiological process behind their clinical presentation. As a doctor, you would make a diagnosis by conducting tests in addition to taking history and examination. And then you will try to gauge what is the prognosis, change the prognosis through therapy, and that will improve the outcome of your patient. For each one of these steps in the clinical process, there are knowledge requirements, which you could describe as being etiologic research, diagnostic research, or prognostic research, or therapy research. Each of this research can be conducted by collecting data directly from patients. This is called primary research. Or it can be conducted by collecting data from published papers on these topics. And this is called systematic review. From this, you can begin to see that what type of research is possible for you to do that will require less resource and will benefit from the collaborative working that you can undertake while being a medical student studying at various stages through your 5-year course. My advice to you is that a systematic review will allow you to undertake the work directly and immediately without the need of going through the need for obtaining ethics approval or informed consent from individuals. And this, I suspect, is the most, in inverted commas, convenient type of research that you as a group of medical students can undertake and successfully publish on several occasions in your 5-year medical school curriculum. So at this stage, I'm going to stop and see if there are any questions before I proceed to address the next question. Okay, I don't see any comment arising in the chat. So I'm going to proceed to the next question, which is, what type of should be preferred, systematic review or a cross-sectional study? So I present the question to you as put to me, but you can see that I divide research into 2 groups as outlined in the previous slide, where you either collect data directly from people or you collect data from published papers. And you can see that my preference is that your question as a student can be addressed far better by undertaking systematic review where data are collected from published papers instead of having to go to patients with the need to obtain ethics approval and informed consent, and then following people up, which may not be feasible within your 5-year study. However, given that the term cross-sectional study was put to me in this question, it's important for me to highlight to you that formulating the question requires a particular format of thinking. This is described usually in what is called the PICO structure, where for each question, you got to think about who are the participants, what are the interventions and exposures and comparators and the outcomes. And then once you know this information, you can think about the correct design for the study. So if the question is about whether there are 2 options in this condition, one is a new treatment or an existing treatment, and the outcome is survival, whether the patient will be alive or dead, then the correct design in this type of situation will be either one of the 2, a cohort design or a randomized design. So the choice of study design depends on the nature of your question. Your question here is about prognosis because you're looking at whether the patient will survive or not. On the other hand, if your question was about diagnostic accuracy, In this case, randomization or patient follow-up may not be required, and a cross-sectional study might be sufficient. And that type of study will be a study that compares a new test with a gold standard test. Okay, here I also note a question: does one type of research outweigh another in terms of value, like systematic or taking data from patients? So you mean, is a study conducted directly, taking data directly from patient, is more valuable than a systematic review? Well, if you have received courses in evidence-based medicine, you will know that within evidence-based medicine, a systematic review of randomized controlled trial without heterogeneity is raised at a level much higher than that of an individual study or data collected directly from patients in an individual study. So I think the answer is, in evidence-based medicine hierarchy, systematic reviews are ranked higher than individual studies with data collected individually within them. We can come to address this in more detail in a moment when we address the next question. But it nicely opens the door for the next slide, which is describing to you here an individual study where people, following their consent, are allocated to receive either a new treatment or a control treatment, and then they are followed up for the outcome, and an effect size is calculated within comparing the outcomes within the different groups. And this type of study is called a cohort study. On the other hand, you may start with the outcome, go backward in time and assess whether people had exposure, and you'd collect this data and come back to collect the effect size. In this case, the direction of travel is backwards in time, and this is called a case control study. These data, whether in cohort study or case control study, are often reported in published papers. So you can obtain these data instead of directly from patients by going to the published data and collating those data in systematic reviews. Right, the next question is, suggest some article type that require no data collection. Well, we go back to our life cycle of research. And then again, this is a question about research question or study design. But I take you to a published article where I am a co-author. You can see that an editorial or a commentary could be a communication from a clinician to a practitioner, academic clinician to a practitioner. And this does not require any data collection. Well, it requires transformation in words and paragraphs of your thinking about the topic. Your thinking may have been based on your prior reading of articles that contain data, but the description of your own thinking into a coherent commentary does not necessarily require use of data analysis, or data presentation of results, or data interpretation. Equally, editorial and commentary can be written by a scientist directed to an academic clinician, or from a scientist to another scientist. So you can see that these type of editorials or commentaries do not require data collection. From your perspective as medical student, most of these type of articles are invited by journal editors. So perhaps you will not receive an invitation to write. And if you submit, perhaps the submitted article will not be entertained by editors, because typically the editors invite these articles. The next question is, can one person write an article or publish it? Just one author only? Well, Again, this is a question about publication. Here I show you a journal that I edited, and I show you also that the acceptance rate of primary studies where data are collected from patients in this journal during my time as chief editor was around 15%. A systematic review, the probability of success of getting accepted was around 30%. So you can see that the overall acceptance rate was no more than around 10%, considering all the submissions. But one type of article had a very high success rate, and that is called a letter. A letter or correspondence appears in any journal, usually by a single author, as a commentary or a critical appraisal of a published article in that journal. So if you are thinking as an individual student of writing a short article that the journal can entertain and publish and will appear in PubMed as a citation, then think about writing a letter to the editor about a recently published article in that journal. This type of an article can be published by an individual author, accepted by the journal, and appear in bibliographic databases. The next question is writing an article a tough job? Does the quality of research depend on the number of words or references in the manuscript? Well, this question again is about publication. Well, first of all, the usual structure of a paper. By a paper, I mean a primary study or a systematic review published as an original article. Remember here that systematic reviews are also regarded as original articles in most journals. Here, I'm not referring to a commentary or a correspondence. This type of an article has a title, an abstract, introduction, methods, results, discussion, acknowledgements, references, figures, and tables. You can already see that you have to write all of these things coherently. And I can tell you that this is not an easy task. I would advise you to work in groups. And I think you can be groups of students from final year and third and fourth year, and even first and second year, bringing different levels of expertise and knowledge towards contributing to the writing. And then once you submit an article, look, it's got to go through peer review. It will be revised. It will probably be rejected. You will have to resubmit to another journal. Ultimately, some journal will accept it. So the task of writing an article, leave alone the task of doing the research, is not an easy task. Typically, we say the idea is to make a first good impression through title, abstract, and introduction, and making a good lasting impression through discussion and conclusion. But the reality is, given that a very large number of papers are rejected, even without sending for peer review, the most important thing is making the first impression, which will be the lasting impression. Well, moving on, how to select the right journal for publishing an article. And I also noticed there is a question appearing in the chat, so I'll pick that up now if it is relevant. So your question is, do Pakistani journals hold good value, or should we aim for PubMed only? Well, Pakistan has a handful of journals in PubMed. So please don't forget that Pakistani journals do have impact factor, and they do exist inside databases such as PubMed. Just so that you understand the enormity of the publishing landscape, there are probably more than 50,000 journals. A third of these are biomedical journals. A third of 50,000 is around 15,000. And PubMed has only around 5,000 or 6,000 journals. So please bear in mind that there are several thousand journals not covered inside PubMed. There are other bibliometric databases besides PubMed. So if you are going to do a systematic review, be conscious that you must consider other bibliographic databases. Okay, returning to the question of how to select the right journal. Well, first you got to understand, what is a journal? A journal has an owner that appoints a chief editor, who then appoints an editorial board and editors. They create a strategy using existing documents about how to run a journal, and they receive papers which they assess and reject, and the ones they accept become the content of the journal, which are then passed on to the publisher, who put those in the form of a PDF file on the journal website. The journal that existed in a print format for circulation is really something that belongs to the last century. Going forward, such journals or products will probably disappear completely. And in fact, already most journals only exist in online form. So this is a journal. How are you going to select it? Well, there are different types of journals. Well, to simplify, there are traditional journals which do not charge authors. They charge libraries and universities or subscribers as individuals. And the other are open access journals which charge the authors. And then there is a third category, which we might call predatory journals, who charge both the authors and the readers. Your idea should be to seek a journal that is not a predatory journal. Then there is a separate question, is whether you have the capacity to pay for article publishing charge. Well, to find out which journal does not have an article publishing charge, the simple solution is most publishing houses have a search engine where you can copy and paste your abstract and press the search button, and it will then throw you a list of journals included within that publishing company. For example, if you search in Elsevier or Wiley or Taylor and Francis, your abstract will be mapped to the objectives of the various journals they publish, and the ones that match your objectives will be then thrown to you in front of you, just like a Google search would throw in front of you your searches with respect to relevance. And from within them, you will know whether they are open access, where they charge authors, or whether they are subscription journals. And then through these journal suggesters, you can make further assessment of whether you want a high impact journal as measured by impact factor. And then you can also think about your own personal choices. Who is your target audience? How quickly does the paper get published if it is accepted? And what is the rejection resubmission cycle if the paper is rejected? So considering these features, you can then make an objectively informed choice. We now move to the next question, which is, what is the importance of statistics in medical research? This specific aspect relates to, in my opinion, data analysis. Data analysis depends on how the study was designed. So statistics is important, but it is subservient to study design. So here I explain to you how a question is formulated. And under this question, you then have a design, and within that design, you then have certain parameters that allow you, for example, to calculate the sample size. The sample size calculation requires consideration of what is the effect size. The effect size determines this, along with things like alpha, beta, and beta refers to power. Considering all these features, the sample size is determined. The sample comes from eligible population, and the eligible population comes from source population. So you can see that statistics has a fundamental role at the time of designing the study, and then it has subsequently a role in data analysis. Our next question is rather long. I'll leave it for you to read on the screen while I look at what has turned up on the chat. So this question, well, there are several questions here. One question is, does nationality and location of author make a difference to editor? I've heard most journals don't prefer papers published in Pakistan. Well, if they are already published, presumably the question refers to most journals don't prefer research conducted in Pakistan. Is that true? Well, my answer is that is not true. The question depends on what is research, what is the priority of the research conducted to the journal. We'll come back to address this later on in the presentation. So please forgive me if I postpone the answering this question. And by the way, you say you have heard that most journals don't prefer. I don't know who has told you this information. If you are hearing things, please make an assessment of the value of information you are receiving. If the person giving you this information has never served as an editor in a journal, or has never undertaken research, or has never published a paper, indeed, such comment provided to you is totally valueless. How can we ensure, the next question, how can we ensure that our topic is unique? We'll address this shortly. A problem most students face here is the scarcity of good mentors. Well, look, I am here. You look for people who are prepared to come and talk to you. There are many people who want to come and help you. Pakistan has many good researchers spread all over the world. The question here is on the screen, can we write an original article based on data collection in a private clinic where there is informed consent, but there is no ethics committee? Well, it's a good question. The answer is a very simple answer. The research has to be conducted in a responsible fashion. If an organization does not have an ethics committee, it is not an organization that can take the responsibility for conducting research. Therefore, the answer to the question, can research be conducted in an organization that does not have an ethics committee, is no. And such a research will probably not be entertained by journals for publication. Next question, how many studies are required to write a systematic review? Well, the systematic review occurs usually after more than one study exists in the literature. So the minimum number required, I presume, is 2.